There you go.
Yep.
Welcome, everyone, to the public hearing for the 24-25 MCPL budget discussion, discussion. I'm Gordon Cook. I'm a Platte County trustee. There's some other trustees also in the audience here, and I'll let Aaron do introductions as well as staff. And so I'm just going to turn the meeting over to Aaron Mason, CEO. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? That's nice. Normally you have to ask them twice. Yeah, thanks for coming. This is a pleasant surprise. We were talking amongst ourselves yesterday, we're like, no one's going to show up. But in fact, we have an audience, and I'm very happy and grateful that all of you came out today. As Gordon said, in the audience, we have a few additional trustees. We have Lori Lemunion, who's here. We have Bob Johnson, Joyce Limburgo, and am I missing anyone? No, well, we have a former trustee, Brent Schaunemeyer. But thank you, Brent, for coming, and a number of my senior leadership team. So thank you all for coming today. A quick overview of how this will go. I'm going to make a few remarks and kind of give you some context for the budget. We'll talk a little bit about the impact on taxpayers, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for some feedback from the audience and questions that we're happy to answer if you have them. This is a different location for us normally. In years past, we've held these hearings in Jackson County. However, this year we chose to move them up here into Clay County. For two reasons, really. One, and most importantly, we're a unified district, right? We represent 3 counties, but in essence, it's a library system, a single library system that serves all 3 counties. The second reason is that the patterns of use, right? The demand for library services are relatively consistent throughout all 3 counties. They're almost indistinguishable from each other. And what do I mean by that? Let's see, just in the last 2 years, our circulation has increased 400,000. So this year will be a significant year for the library, that we're on track to doing 10 million items circulated, both digital and physical, in this year, which is the highest number that we've ever seen in the library's history. So 10 million items are passing through our library system every year. 50% of that number is in ebooks. And this year, in January, it was announced that Mid-Continent Public Library is 10th in the nation, or 10th in the world, excuse me, when it comes to ebook circulation. And this is an important number to remember because it does affect some of the allocations in our budget. Programming over the last 3 years has gone from 60,000 annually to 190,000 this year. Our gate in the last 3 years has increased from 1.8 million to 2.5 million. And the reason why I'm bringing these numbers up is that the trends are going upward, and we're presenting a budget to you today that meets those trends and also plans for future use. It's also a significant year for the libraries that we're wrapping up our capital project, right? In the past 7 years, we've renovated 28 libraries and built 6 new libraries in our system. And to maintain these buildings, we need to make continued investment. I think it's important. You sit in a building like this and you look at it and it's brand new and you think, well, this is wonderful. But there are many other locations throughout the system that didn't receive this level of investment, but will be needing maintenance reserves to keep them current and to adapt to the changing trends in library use. And Jeremy will talk more about that as we continue on. And lastly, to support this library system, this is the first year where all of our buildings will be open at the same time. We had to make investment in the back of house to administrative functions. So we've made some pretty impressive improvements over the last year, but it's the beginning, right? So we've enhanced our finance department, we've increased staff in our HR department. We fully staffed East Independence without adding new employees. And we've also built 2 new divisions within our administrative headquarters, one that works with organizational culture and the other works with digital innovation. All of this was done through attrition or reallocating staff. But in the coming years, there may be a need to add additional staff to the total headcount. And you'll learn more about that as time goes on today. It's an exciting year. And this is a year where we're planning for great things, but we're also looking forward into the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. What does it take to sustain this, this wonderful library system that we work for? So now I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and he's going to give you an exciting presentation filled with numbers and formulas. So, Jeremy. You're welcome.
Welcome everybody today to our public hearing on the proposed tax levy and the proposed 24-25 budget. What I'd like to do for just a few minutes is go over a highlight of our budget, as well as the property taxes that are necessary to fund that budget, and then go over the taxpayer impact, and then we'll open up the public hearing to get your comments and feedback. So we'll start with the budget calendar. A budget process is pretty much a year-round endeavor. We start in earnest with the Board of Trustees. This year we started on March 19th with our first study session about the budget. That's really where Aaron laid out his goals and objectives for the coming budget year. We laid out a rough picture of our financial plan. If you haven't had a chance to see that meeting, it's on our YouTube site. I would encourage you to go back there to really pick up on some of the flavor of what we're excited about for this year's budget. After that session, the budget went in pieces to the Personnel Committee, the Technology Committee, the Building Committee. And then we had another work session on May 14th where we gave pretty much this presentation with just more detail to the full Board of Trustees. Again, if you haven't had a chance to view that presentation, I encourage you to go to our YouTube site and watch that on May 14th. And then we are here today for the public hearing. After this meeting, there'll be 2 more meetings where the Board of Trustees will consider the budget. The next one is June 13th, where the Finance Committee will review the budget as presented. And then finally on June 18th, the budget is scheduled for consideration approval by the Board of Trustees. Once all of that is finished, we receive the final assessed valuations from all 3 counties. And in September, we'll go through the legal process of establishing the approved levy rate for the upcoming tax season. So I'm going to start with a budget summary. Our total budget has revenues of $77.6 million and expenditures of $80.7 million. You'll see in another slide here that spending balance, fund balance in the capital plan, also the growing fund. The recommended budget provides funding for all of the strategic initiatives that Aaron lined out in March, which include a capital maintenance plan, planning for the future of our headquarters location, planning to provide more resources for the under-resourced communities within our district, providing additional funding for digital innovation and ebooks that are experiencing exponential growth of usage, and also expanding our programming and funding of community spaces for our patrons. So this is our budget. The primary fund is our general fund. We also have a capital fund, the grant and gift fund that I just mentioned, our debt service fund, which is where we record the debt payments for the certificates of participation that were issued to fund the renovations, of which one of them you're sitting in. A scholarship fund, community foundation fund, endowment funds, and then finally our health insurance fund. We'll focus the majority of our presentation on some general fund. This is where the property taxes are collected primarily, and where the majority of our operations take place. So our recommended budget revenues, as I mentioned, is $77.6 million. This is about 5% higher than our current projection for this fiscal year that we're in. And it's predominantly due to the recommendation to restore the levy, which we estimate would bring in an additional $4.4 million to the library. Our recommended budget expenditures is $80.7 million, which is about 3% lower than our projection for the current fiscal year. But that's really due to the fact that we have significant more invested in the capital plan in the current year than we will next year, as as Aaron mentioned, we're phasing that out. So the first thing we want to discuss are wages and benefits. This is about 8% more than the current year and is in compliance with our pay plan. The Personnel Committee reviewed that pay plan and those recommendations, and ultimately has approved that portion of our budget to be forward to the full board. The next line is materials. This is where we buy the books and the CDs, all of our digital content. It is about 6% more than the current year. This is to address that rising demand and increase in cost that we've been experiencing in the electronic media. The next line is programming. Sorry. Just a little over $1 million. This is about 13% more than our current year. This, we believe, shows our continuing commitment to deliver quality programming for all patrons across our entire district. And then the majority of our increase is in operations. So you have operation expenses in most of our funds. The overall operating budget is increasing about 24%. Some of the more significant increases are due to technology improvements, increased charges for professional and contractual services, utility increases, and increase in building maintenance. The technology increases are to address the digital initiatives that were approved by the board goal, excuse me. The professional services are being increased to provide funding for an updated strategic plan, assistance with implementing a new financial system for the district, and for assistance in addressing the gap in services to under-resourced communities. Our utilities are increasing to address rising costs in the utilities and the understanding that this will be the first year that the library has ever operated 34 branches. So we have an increase in there as well for those new branches. And then building maintenance is also increasing to provide additional funding for projects at headquarters and our under-resourced communities. The next line is debt service. As I mentioned previously, this is where we pay the principal and interest on the certificates of participation that were issued to fund parts of the capital plan. And based on that debt service schedule, the budget is about 7% less than last year as the payment dropped. And then finally, capital projects. You'll see the majority of that is in the capital project fund. And this is, as Aaron mentioned, this is where we paid for the 28 branches to be remodeled. We built or we relocated 6 other branches. And that project that started 7 years ago is at its end. Our final 2 branches are opening this month, which is exciting. So we intend to have that fully paid in the next calendar year, the next fiscal year. And then we're recommending that we begin to establish a capital maintenance fund for not only those branches, but the other facilities that are within our district that didn't get as much of that maintenance from the original plan. Most likely because they were newer into our district 10 years ago, the plans we developed. But we want to make sure that we have adequate funding for roofs and HVAC systems, any parking lot issues, any drainage issues. And so we're recommending an additional $1 million be provided by the general fund to the capital plan or to the capital project fund, excuse me, to begin establishing a pay-as-you-go capital maintenance reserve so that we don't have to borrow money in the future to maintain these facilities. And then lastly, in the capital project fund is $500,000 for us to begin to assess the current condition of our headquarters and the feasibility of either renovating the current facility or finding a new location that better meet the library's needs. This next slide is to illustrate the cash flow for the library district. The blue line represents the average revenues collected by month for the last 4 years. And the yellow line represents the expenditures over the last 4 years by month. So you can see our expenditures are relatively static month over month. However, our revenues are predominantly collected in December and January of each fiscal year. Since our fiscal year ends in June, that basically means that we need to make sure that we have enough cash in reserve at the end of June to carry us all the way to the next December. Now we will talk about the property taxes. We'll start with the assessed valuation. This chart here shows our assessed valuation by year. Back in 2017, all the way to our projection for 24-25. As you can see, our projection is essentially flat, as this is a non-reassessment year, so we don't anticipate a significant growth in assessed valuation. You'll also note that our mill levy, the levy rate, is on this chart. You'll see that it's been going down as the assessed valuation went up in compliance with the Hancock Amendment. So just for those who may not know, or a refresher, the Hancock Amendment is a statutory requirement that property taxes be capped at the lesser of actual growth, the consumer price index, or 5%. And the last year was the first time in recent memory the library was capped at that 5% maximum, because both the consumer price index and the actual valuation growth were higher than 5%. But normally it's less than 5% because it's capped at either the consumer price index or the actual growth, which has been less than 5%. This next slide. Go. So these are the actual property taxes collected for that same time period. And then this green bar is had the levy not been voluntarily reduced. And we only provide this to note that it's not technically a tax increase that we're asking for. We're simply asking that the levy be restored. You'll see that had the levy not been reduced, that line is, or the revenues for the current, or the recommended budget year, excuse me, are in line with where they had been, would have been had the levy not been reduced. This is my last slide. This is the taxpayer impact. I wanted to take a minute and just discuss what the taxpayer impact would be on a hypothetical home. So in this analysis, we valued the home at $150,000 back in 2018. We then provided whatever the actual increase in assessed valuation was for the library district by year. And so you'll note that a home that was worth $150,000 in 2018 would be worth $208,438 in 2024, which is roughly a 39% increase. You'll see that the taxes that were paid back in 2018 on that $150,000 home were $112.95. And the taxes, if the levy is restored, would be $123.40, which is about 9%. So we believe that the library has been a good steward of tax dollars. We believe that the plan that we've lined out addresses not only our current needs, but our needs into the future. That is all I have. So we will turn it over to the public now for any comments regarding the budget or the levy.
Maybe we could undim the lights. Jim's gonna get that. Well, we turn it over to you. If you have any initial thoughts or anything you'd like to share, we're happy to listen and answer any questions.
I'll break the ice. Do you want me to
Sure.
just stand up?
Can you also
Okay.
state your name?
Yes, my name is Karen with a Y, Epler, EPPLER. Thank you for the time today to do this. Appreciate it. I'm happy to see other people here. I want to personally just encourage the trustees to fully fund the budget as presented by the library staff. It's funny, when I thought about this, I thought, I can actually clearly recall where I was on the day when I heard that we passed the levy, because I felt so proud of my community. And I thought, there was a need to invest in the libraries, and we knew it, we chose to do it. So I really want to see us stand by that. We now have a framework for an amazing network of resources. We're partway there. Funny thing, I'd always had my library branch. Anymore, I feel like I have a network of library resources. It just feels bigger. I know we've got genealogy, culinary arts, small business, voters registration throughout, reservable rooms, beautiful spaces, and of course, strategically placed coffee, which is very important. Through this investment in your communications, I think, and I use our libraries differently. So I feel like we're really moving forward. But shiny doors, new lights, landscaping, outdoor patios, drive-through windows, more locations, pretty signage, and the promise of coffee and maybe a baked good. That's great, but that's the infrastructure for a great library network. We need to make sure we fund the services to deliver a success. We run the risk at this point of getting a couple wheels off the road if the finance committee does not bring the full recommendation to the board. So I encourage that. It's not just about maintenance and a more extensive network of facilities and keeping our technology current. It's about delivering services provided and promised to our patrons, my neighbors across 3 counties, and maximizing the potential of these great spaces. So please help the staff bring the great libraries to life. Thank you.
I'm Rita Rhodes, and I'm a taxpayer. And you folks are in the business of building and maintaining libraries. I appreciate that. But I'm in the business of trying to stay in my home. I'm a senior citizen. I have 1 income, and taxes keep going up and up. And I'm sitting here wondering, am I going to be able to afford my home? Is this really necessary? I know you think it is, but from my point of view, you have sufficient libraries. We don't need more taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Purdom. I live in Liberty. I just wanted to say, first of all, I have some concerns about the budget. I know over the last 2 years, our staff has been stretched pretty thin. I'm not sure that we really are, and I appreciated your comments about addressing staffing needs in the future, but I think some of our folks are running on fumes that staff our libraries, and I would even be worried about some security issues when there's a minimal number of people in some of our branches. But having said that, I think the board and the professional staff have really tried to be very good stewards of the public's money and have put together a budget that I think is fair and reasonable, and I'm very supportive of that. I'm also very supportive of restoration of the levy. It's pretty clear now, 2 years after the board took a voluntary reduction in the levy, that the assumptions that were underlying that cut just were incorrect. The library board has had to borrow money and spend taxpayer dollars on interest for loans just to cover cash flow issues. And so I think restoring the levy is important, and obviously is going to be critical to meeting the budget that's been presented this year. So I'm very supportive of the budget as presented and the restoring the levy in September.
Thank you. Maybe a response that could address both of these comments. not to relitigate the past, but I will say coming in January of 23, was it? So it's a blur to me. That reduction had a silver lining in that it helped us kind of figure out what the baseline is to run a library system. And we learned quite a bit. And as I mentioned, we made adjustments to the way we staff our headquarters buildings. We made investments in finance to improve transparency and accountability when it comes to expenditures of taxpayer funds. But really what we came out of this last year learning is that our current level of revenues is not sufficient to operate a library system of this size. And by comparison, across the country, even with a full restoration, we're far below comparable systems. And I hear you about tax bills. I do. I guess what I could say is we know what the ceiling is. A fully restored levy will never go past that point. And as Jeremy showed you in one of his slides, you're talking about a commitment of roughly $10 a month to support a library system of this size. But I do understand. And the reason why we've made such an investment in our finance department is so we can be much more transparent and show the way we're allocating resources to deliver the services that the communities take advantage of. To your point, we can't guarantee that things remain the same for years to come with this level of funding. And I hear you about staffing levels. And if we see an increase in demand during peak hours during the day, that may mean a reduction in services at night, which are probably less popular than what we see during the day. This very branch here cannot meet demand when it comes to services to families and children, just because of the number of people that come in here and the number of staff we have on site, which is in the neighborhood of, what is it? Maybe, I know you don't know off the top of your head. This is Jennifer Ridley,
Probably about 40 people.
maybe about 40 people. But we struggle to meet demand here. And some of our most successful programs that we do on an annual basis also take place at this location. So we need to think about how we allocate resources in the coming years. So the message that I do want to communicate to the public is if the budget's approved and if we restore the levy to a point that would fund this budget, it does not mean that we're flush with cash and that we won't be reevaluating our service model in the years to come. So we just want to be just very open about that. Jeremy referenced under-resourced communities, and I think it's important that we define that. What we mean by that is there are certain areas that are maybe less fortunate economically or further out in rural areas. And it's easy to forget about them when we have conversations about the library, especially in a beautiful building like this. But our rural communities are as important to us as people that live in densely populated areas who've experienced recent growth. And what I would hate to do is curtail services in those areas at the expense of communities that have more resources. So these communities exist in all three counties, right? You have Northern Platte, you have libraries that border the county line with Clinton County in Clay. And then you have Eastern Jackson County. And these are all huge library supporters. There's areas that never received a new building, and I'm not proposing that we build one, but nonetheless, they're anchors of the community and they're very important to them. Without us, they would be without. So we have to think about how we deliver services in those areas, which is why we've made allocations in our budget to plan for the future. So, anyone else?
Go ahead and take the reins, I guess. My name is Waylon Wright. I'm a local college student. I go to Park University. I've been a big supporter of the library system since I was a wee little lad. I've spent a lot of time in my local library at Parkville, Smithville at times, and I feel that the getting the levy back to where it was is very important for our community for the sheer fact of keeping up with, like, the big thing is maintenance. I know Smithville, whenever I was up there, there were some issues during pre-COVID, during COVID years with HVAC issues, stuff like that. And I believe keeping up with maintenance. And since now we have a growing community of libraries, I believe that's very important. And more than anything, I think I spent a lot of time at the Parkfield branch using study rooms and using that space because it's an easy spot to be able to get your work done and not have to worry about, you know, if you're down at the school getting interrupted by lots of lab groups and stuff. It's a good area. And especially another important thing that really did help me, and I think it's important to point out, was when I was in my senior year taking the ACT, which, you know, very, very important to get into any college. The library had many, many free options to be able to prepare me so I could get into college easier. And furthermore, that helped me be able to get a very good scholarship at Park University. And so I believe the library system is very important, especially to everyone in all parts of the community, because it's further going to grow our communities and help the people more, especially as we grow and try to become stronger communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Can we all give Wayne some credit for saying "wee little lad"? When was the last time we heard that?
Wayland.
Wayland?
Yes.
Oh, Wayland. Okay.
Stumble over sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very important point. I'm not gonna guess everybody's age here, but Wayland is probably on the lower end of the spectrum than us. But we are making investment in people that are much younger than us, and we have to think about that. Again, back to not meeting demand to families and children. I mean, there's a lot of conversations about our public school system, or school systems just in general, and how maybe they're not doing as good as they could, right? The library serves this vital need, kind of fostering a love of reading, which I think we all would agree is an essential ingredient in kind of a healthy and well-functioning society. And so I firmly believe that there is value in this. And look, to be honest with you, I've been honest with you this whole time. I've been in libraries for 20 years, and my life story is very different than most library workers. I did not spend time in public libraries as a child. In fact, there was only one in my community, and it was not as wonderful as this. And I discovered them in college. But I often thought to myself, you know, if I didn't work here, would I use library services? And I think the answer is kind of mixed, right? Like maybe no for some things, but maybe yes for others. But what I saw as a library professional is that the community uses the library heavily, right? And my tax bill in Cleveland, Ohio, supported those services for a community that lived in the area. And I think that this community and the community I come from are better off by having a network of libraries placed there. I think I'm trying to pick up a good example. Well, I can think of many in Cleveland, but one in particular. I live in Raytown, you know, and there's not much in terms of public resources in a community like that. But the other night, I went there to see the Kansas City Symphony perform in the parking lot in a place like Raytown. And wouldn't you know it, maybe like 75 to 100 people, families and children, came out to see them play and learn about classical music, an opportunity that I don't think would exist without something like the library being there. Coincidentally, the same program was held here at Whitney, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but with Withers, yeah. And so that's the beauty of the library, that we can kind of leverage our relationship with partners in the community to the benefit of the public. So that's all I got there. Anyone else? Yes?
My name is Carol Kingery, and I'm an employee part-time at the Withers Ranch. I didn't come prepared to speak at all, but I feel like there's a few things I want to say. It's amazing. At home, I have internet, high-speed internet. I have a printer, computer, all those things that are really handy for me. But it's amazing how many people in our community don't have those services in Liberty. But I've worked at North Oak, I've worked to Antioch. And I can tell you that so many people come in, even on a daily basis, to use just the computers. They copy and they print. It's amazing. We can get photocopy for 10 cents. And you just can't go anywhere else and get those kind of services at that rate. Another interesting thing are the databases we have. Yesterday, someone came in and said, hey, where do you have the tapes for foreign languages? We have them online. And you can go out there to Mango and pull down, 100 different languages to learn. So we have an incredible amount of things that we just don't know until you go out there and just, look around on our website. But there's a couple things as a part-time employee that I'd like to bring up. Please don't think I'm complaining, but safety is a big issue. We used to have 2 employees on the front desk at all times. And we've realigned our staffing inside so that there may be at different times. If we have story time, there's going to be 2 people at the desk, but other times there's going to be 1 person on the desk and someone back in the juvenile section filing, or shelf reading, or doing stuff like that, keeping an eye on the front desk for when they are busy. The interesting thing to know about that is no one in the workroom can see us. If we have a problem on the front desk, there isn't anybody that can say, hey, it looks like they're having a problem out there. Or we've got a silent doorbell that rings in the back, but we don't have anybody watching us except that other person in the juvenile section that's filing, shelving away. Another thing that's interesting, and again, I'm not complaining, but at night before we close, we clean. Now, we don't do a deep clean. We don't get out the vacuum cleaner. But if there's spills or anything like that, we have to clean them. If the bathroom's a mess, someone's like made a mess in there, liquid spills, we have to clean that up. We take the trash out, we empty all the waste baskets and stuff like that. I don't think that's a duty that many of us thought that a librarian would be doing. Again, I'm not complaining. It sounds like I am, but I'm not complaining. I would also say I really appreciate the increased value of my home. I had my home looked at last year because I was thinking about moving. And when the realtor told me what it was worth, I about fell over. I could not believe it was definitely worth about 40% more than I had paid for it. I was just shocked. And I've talked to many people about the levy and restoring it. And everyone I've talked to is in favor of restoring it. And I feel really strongly that it's just a few bucks a month. And I would be happy to have that restored. Just to get us to keep our services as they are. This isn't going to put 2 people back out on the front desk again. It's not going to take away my cleaning or anything like that. But I think just to keep our services up to par, it's important that we restore the levy. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brent Schonemeyer. I live at 3704 South Grand in Independence, Missouri. I'm here to support the restoration of the levy because I promised myself and others that I would do so. So I feel like I fulfilled a promise. The restoration of the levy is important, but equally important is the conversations that have occurred in the past 2 years between staff and the trustees around this financial status of the library system. The materials are clearer. They share pertinent information in a salient and understandable fashion. And that in some ways, it's hard to operate a system at this level if there's confusion about where we are, what we're going, and what the numbers are. In addition to speaking for the restoration of the levy, I think it's important to understand there's considerable efforts have been made to restore trust. And that is a scarce commodity in the world that we live in today. So I want here to share my appreciation of the staff and my gratitude for those conversations that occurred. It's important to not talk past each other, but to talk with each other. And I think that has occurred so far. This is a levy that has supported by the voters. That point has been made several different times. The needs have been clearly outlined in the budget. I think that they're reasonable. Maintenance of the buildings is important. This is a system that's now operating at scale.
The beauty of the Mid-Continent Public Library System is it's a consolidated library, and the number of taxpayers that contribute to its functioning in some senses make whatever increases are warranted or justified smaller than they otherwise would be if it were a smaller library system. This is perhaps one of the 20 largest public library systems in the United States, but it feels local. It feels like home. It feels my branch. But understand is that you can go anywhere and you have the benefit of a system that provides resources electronically, provides rooms, provides spaces. I should have said at the outset, I'm a library lover by nature, by temperament, and by fact. I love this library system, and I'm here to sort of support that. One small thing, I would sort of raise this. This is on page 39 of the recommended budget. This is the debt schedule. So there are opportunities in the future, particularly after year 2026, to pay off early. I added it up from 2026 to 2038. Library system, if it just does the regular debt schedule, will pay $12.9 million in interest. What does $12.9 million in interest buy anybody? It doesn't buy you a service. It doesn't provide you a second person at the desk. It doesn't provide electronic resources. So a strategy could be in years out, can the library system set aside enough funds so some prepayment of what the interest might be. So that's an opportunity that I would raise, not for this budget because it's not a possibility, but in future budgets. So once again, my appreciation to the staff, my appreciation to the trustees who took time out of their day to be here. And I look for a favorable vote to restore the levy when we meet on June 18th. Thank you.
I'm Marilyn Rice, and I'm in the minority. I can't support another increase. I live in Platte County, and they're asking us to pass the biggest tax increase in that county's history for a new jail. And I just have to start saying no. I can't afford it. My utilities are also going up, and so is everything else. So for me personally, I don't use the library to buy coffee. I use it to go check out books. In fact, all my libraries, it said no food or drink allowed. So I just can't support another tax.
Thank you. Thank you. I get it. And I do really, I appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts. As I said, I think in the beginning, we were preparing for an empty room and this right here, the fact that we have so many people gathered together to talk about the library, to me says that the library is important. And also taxes are important. So thank you for coming. When I arrived, I met with the commissioners of each of the 3 counties. And what I said to them is, I will spend this year figuring out, what we need to operate. And so I take a little bit of issue with the language we're using. The budget informs the decision on what the appropriate rate should be. And so I believe that we've prepared a budget that demonstrates the need and how we're going to, move forward. There's very little, or there's no fluff in it, really. And as I said earlier, we will have to make some difficult decisions in the years to come. But the budget informs kind of our decisions as they relate to revenue. So, I mean, if it's decided by the board to fully fund the levy, then it will support this budget. If not, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and think about where we could make cuts. But what it will mean is there'll be a visible impact on the end user. And then I think we owe it to the people that come after us to maintain these buildings. If we don't maintain them, someone further down the line, maybe a new CFO or a new library director, will have to make even more difficult decisions when it comes to our buildings. So what do they say? Plant the seeds.
For a tree you'll never see.
Yeah.
It's like you'll never be able to sit under its shade.
Right. And in essence, that's what we're doing. really, we're building for the future. Because I really do believe that the libraries are important for communities like this. And we're trying to build kind of a solid foundation that we can sustain over time. Anyone else?
My name is David Weasley, Clay County. I'm not in favor of an increase in, or an increase in the levy. I think that there's certain things that I see as, like what I didn't hear from this presentation was where the belt tightening was. For those of us who are out there tightening our belts when as inflation goes up, as assessments skyrocket, and as they do increase, the library will get more money because of the higher assessment. So there's no talk about that. So I just feel like, I feel like we're going more digital. I like going in to see books. And I would argue that the increase in digital isn't necessarily meaning that more people are reading. Sometimes you just put them in your little list of books that you want to read, but never get around to it. So I would say I've noticed, number of books disappearing and stack shelf height getting lower. I'm just wondering, I don't need all the fancy things. I want the books to read. And I'm not in favor of the levy. I wasn't when it Prop went through. I know a lot of renovations happen, and I do use the library. I think it's a good place to get information. But I don't think that there should be a whole bunch of bells and whistles, and I just want to see more of maybe the belt tightening part of it from a library standpoint to say, what are we doing to actually make things tight? I know you kind of mentioned that you're kind of feel like you're tight, but I just feel like it's, you're dipping into the public's funds to fund the library. And I'm not sure that I'm 100% on board with that.
Right. Well, maybe I should spend more time on it. The belt tightening, I maybe I glossed over it, but we opened a building that isn't a replacement. It's a brand new building. We fully staffed that without adding to cost. We built 2 new departments. I believe we started building the foundation of a finance department that an organization like ours is deserving. All of this without adding to total headcount. There are some environmental factors that are beyond our control. My priority is to pay people a living wage, right? We have to keep up with minimum wage. In our room is Jennifer Ridley, who's our HR director, who's done a lot of work on our pay plan. It's not like annual increases forever, but nonetheless, we have to keep up to recruit qualified people to come in and work for the library. And that's money well spent, right? You have 85% of our workforce is female. Many of them are living with children, and we want them to have a wage that's meaningful and can help them lead a productive life. So these are things that are on our minds and that we're constantly evaluating. But I will say, our pay in relation to other library districts still is below what I believe is kind of standard. So lots of belt tightening, and as I said earlier, I've been around, right? So 18 years in a city that I love, and I'm not casting stones here, but when you're talking about bells and whistles, I simply don't see them here. Like piloting initiatives that get a headline but never live on past 6 months. What I see here is a very thoughtful staff and library system that gives a lot of thought to the investments we make and the initiatives that we fund. You're right. We are about books and resources, but we're also about something else, like Waylon was talking about. Our space is an asset in most communities. And what you'll see when you come to a place like this or a newly opened North Oak branch is young people coming to continue on with their studies or maybe work remotely. And that's very healthy for our community. the last issue I do want to push back on, our collection size is relatively consistent. Year in, year out, we made a modest decrease in our collection of physical materials to keep up with pricing of electronic content. But you'd really need like, I don't think you see a visible difference at all. So where these empty stacks are, I've yet to see them in our community. I mean, I do have some concerns about rural libraries, and maybe they're not receiving the resources that they want. But for places like this, these are massive collections. Our two most recent branches that we're opening, Riverside and East Independence, both are in the neighborhood, or I want to say collection size of roughly 80 or 90,000, if not mistaken. But no reduction in the collection size. So we're continuing to make that investment based on, circulation statistics and demand. So I'm glad to hear that everybody uses the library. It's great. Anyone else? All right. Well, how do we officially? Oh, we have, Rita, yes. This is another Platte County trustee. This is Rita Weiss.
Yesterday, I received a phone call from another Platte County resident, and they wanted to come today with couldn't, so they asked whether they could send me their, how they feel about increasing of the levy. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to read it?
I believe I already have, but you can give it to me. If you want to read it out loud to the group?
Sure.
Okay.
We are unable to attend the library public hearing tomorrow, June 4th. Please share our comments with the Board of Trustees. Dear Board of Trustees, this is to inform you that we are opposed to any library tax levy increase. In these hard times of inflation and soaring prices, it is inconceivable that you would consider doing this. Seniors and people on fixed incomes are suffering the most. Why would you place this burden on them? Are you not able to prioritize your requirements, draw cut lines, and determine what you can do without? It is unacceptable to return to the taxpayer to maintain your operation at a level that apparently refuses to tighten its belt. When your libraries are some of the most impressive buildings in our communities, your long-range planning should have considered it costs more to maintain a Cadillac than it does a Ford. The tax-paying community should not be the ones to suffer poor decision-making in an era when the internet is quickly making brick and mortar libraries an anachronism. Certainly, inflation affects your operation too. We don't disagree. However, learn to reallocate, reprioritize, and figure out how you can operate in today's environment without raising our taxes. Sincerely, Richard and Janet Stock.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add one additional comment, if I may. When I was at the work session, we're talking about why haven't you tightened your belt? Why haven't you tightened your belt? And one of the things that really struck me, I went back to look this up. In 2019, our library had 29 branches and 894 employees. A lot of those were part-time, so you can look at full-time equivalents. But in 2024, we have 34 branches. We've moved some folks to full-time. We have fewer part-time folks, but we're down from 894 employees to 808 employees. And we have a full-time equivalent reduction of 5%. I mean, for people who say there hasn't been any belt tightening, haven't been paying attention, in my opinion. And I really appreciate the fact that the library has been good stewards of our services. And I just think it's important for people to understand that you are being good stewards, that you are trying to tighten your belt when necessary, to try to make your resources go as far as possible. And I just think that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, the presentation that Mr. Purdom, Dr. Purdom, excuse me, is referencing is online, and he's referring to one of our initial budget sessions where we gave a much more detailed overview of the budget, and there you will learn about the trajectory of staffing and pay levels and allocations as they relate to our collection. But what he's saying is correct. The number of people that we employ is less than it was in years past. And the number of sites that we have that are currently open or will be open after June 14th is greater than what we had in the past. Anyway, thank you. Yeah.
Joellen Kirksick. I was not planning to say anything, but as what some people might fondly think of as an old fogey, that generation, as opposed to the wee lads, libraries have changed a lot. You know, when I was in school, you checked out books. That's what a library was for. And, you know, I volunteer in a public school, grade school library, so I shelve a lot. Personally, I don't get the graphic novels, you know, nor do I particularly care for the artwork in children's books. I like the fluffy little bunnies, you know, but I recognize that libraries have changed to accommodate the needs of different generations. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong, I totally appreciate going in and having someone who can help me use my idiot Chromebook or, you know, the library technology. Do I need a team space? No, but I think it's really important for the teens today and those teens who are going to grow up and join the workforce and pay to cover my Social Security, you know, getting little kids, keeping them interested in reading. There were several kids who were just devastated that the last 2 weeks of the school year, they didn't get to check out any books from the school library because we needed to do an inventory. And so in that case, the librarian had brought a couple people in, had invited people in from the Antioch branch to give a talk to these grade schoolers about what programs the library had for them over the summer. And several of them were just way more excited about that than I would have anticipated. But in libraries as a whole, just in public libraries, they're not the places that they used to be, no matter how much some of us might want them to be, just all about books that you can touch. The ebook thing, and I want to curl up with the book. I don't like ebooks, but I know a lot of people who did think they would never like an ebook, but they've adjusted to it. And it, you know, these different things that some of us maybe don't personally see the need for or appreciate. There are a lot of people who do appreciate these different things that the library does now. And as far as, yeah, people down, you know, checking out the ebooks and not reading them, that happens with the hard books as well. Children may confess to it more than adults do, but it does happen. And I've checked, you know, so it's not, again, I'm not on the ebook train at all. But I do recognize that for some people that's, you know, they're not going to be able to get to a library to check out a book, but they can do it from home. And so I think, yeah, the library district has a big challenge being a modern library, a modern public library. Because again, they're not what they used to be, no matter how warm and fuzzy we used to think that the library used to be.
Just to an observation. What's happening right here today really is uplifting to me, right? It's a group of people with opposing viewpoints coming in, openly sharing them without fear of retribution. And it says a lot about the library, and it says a lot about your confidence, I think, in me and my team, that you're willing to come and express your support or not for an increase in taxes. And in today's world, this is a very unique thing, right? If we were having this conversation online, 2 comments in, we'd be calling to tear each other's heads off, right? You know? And I'm so appreciative that you came out and now, and I can't take credit for putting this event here. Jeremy was like, maybe you should do it up north and see if we hear from more people. And it was a great decision to make. Because I think were we to have had this conversation at North Independence, where we do historically, maybe you wouldn't have attended. I don't know. But the fact that you did attend and openly shared your position on this really means a lot to me. And as I stated earlier, the common thread throughout all this audience is everyone here uses the library. The debate comes down to the value as it relates to dollars. And I'm confident, whatever the board decides, we will make it work. But we just do need to think about the impact it has on communities that maybe are further away from us. But thank you again. I really appreciate it. And moving forward, as it comes time to actually making real decisions, I hope that we all continue on with this trend of being cordial with one another. Thank you. Any closing remarks? No? All right. Well, I guess this meeting is officially over, and feel free to keep in contact